I didn't see it coming, so when he kissed me, I froze. And by the look on his face, I think he did too. We both pulled back stunned, not disgusted, just caught completely off guard. My heart pounded, and for a split second, I panicked. But when I glanced around, I realized the party was still in full swing. No one had noticed. "Sorry," he murmured, eyes darting away. "It's just, you're so cute." I didn't say a word. I turned and melted into the crowd, hoping to disappear, to shake off the confusion twisting inside me. Because the thing is, I wasn't a girl. I was a guy in a dress. It hadn't been part of the plan. I swore I wouldn't do it, convinced someone would figure me out. But the temptation was too strong. The need to be her, to be seen, as her overwhelmed the fear. So I gave in. I dressed up. And for the night, I let myself believe that the girl they saw was the girl I longed to be. Not that I was perfect at it, but I had experience. Years of it. I started around 8, experimenting in secret. By 14, I'd managed to sneak out a few times. At 15, I got bold of venturing to the mall, sitting through a movie, existing in public as the version of myself that felt right. No one ever suspected. And now at 16, nearly 17, I knew how to move, how to speak, how to blend in. My mom knew. Of course she knew. Hard to miss the dresses and skirts hanging in my closet, but that hadn't always been the case. Until I was 15, I kept everything hidden, stashed away in a basement corner. My collection wasn't much at first. A few skirts, some dresses. I washed them in secret when the house was empty. But as time went on, I added more shoes, jewelry, makeup, perfume, lingerie. I even crafted my own breast forms and hip padding, tucking them away in the same hiding spot. Then August happened. The heat that summer was brutal, and I made one tiny mistake. I left a small perfume bottle inside my storage case. The pressure must have built up because one day it exploded. The scent hit the basement like a tidal wave. Mom went searching for the source and found everything. I smelled it too. The second I realized what had happened, I rushed downstairs, desperate to salvage my things. But there she was standing over the open case, staring at the truth laid out before her. There was no way to talk my way out of this one. She demanded an explanation, and I had no choice but to give her one. "Let me just," I muttered, quickly tossing my things into the washer before grabbing my laptop. When I returned, she was still there, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. She wasn't surprised, not really. She'd always suspected something. She reminded me of the time she caught me when I was 13. It wasn't Halloween. It wasn't for a costume party. I thought I had covered well, made some excuse she'd believe. But clearly the seed of doubt had been planted. I sat beside her and opened my photo album, turning the screen so she could see. I let the pictures speak for me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. A flicker of a smile. A furrow of her brow. And then, at the last photo, she looked up. You don't even look like," she started, trailing off. Then, with a quiet sigh, she added, "You're really quite pretty as a girl. I never realized how feminine your face is until now." She leaned back, studying me. Then, after a long pause, "I guess you've made yourself pretty clear. I don't get it. I don't think I like it. But you're going to keep doing this, aren't you?" I hesitated, then nodded. Mom exhaled, rubbing her temples. "Before I say anything else, I want to see you. All dressed up. And I mean, the best you can." I blinked. "I'm washing everything right now. In the morning? You have until lunch tomorrow." That was all the commission I needed. The moment my clothes were clean, I brought everything up to my room, carefully hanging them or tucking them away. But I couldn't wait until the next day. I showered, shaved, and dressed immediately. A tan and white pleated skirt, a crisp white pullover top, sheer pantyhose, and white flats. I let my hair fall loose, sleek and smooth, my bangs brushing against my brows. Earrings, a hint of perfume, a final check in the mirror. And then I walked downstairs. Mom was in the kitchen. She glanced up as I entered, her gaze sweeping over me as I opened the fridge, grabbed a soda, then turned to face her. I stood there waiting. her expression unreadable. And then she spoke. From head to toe, every inch of me reflected the girl I had mastered becoming. My hair fell perfectly, framing my face, while my modest curves gave just enough illusion. Long legs, effortless grace I blended in seamlessly, just another girl among many. And I was proud of that. Proud of how well I had learned to become her. Damn, Mom muttered, eyes raking over me. I saw the pictures, but she trailed off, shaking her head as if seeing me in real life rewired something in her brain. That night, we really talked. I finally told her, with absolute certainty, that one day I was going to be a girl. No more wondering, no more hesitating. It wasn't a phase or a game, it was my truth. And then I asked the question that had been pressing against my ribs, waiting to be spoken. Since I was going to become a girl anyway, could I just keep my things in my closet? We both knew what that meant. If she said yes, it was more than just storage, it was quiet permission. A silent agreement that I could dress whenever I wanted. She hesitated but then sighed, finally nodding. Fine, but I need to know when you're going out. You have to tell me. That was as good as I was going to get. I accepted. I didn't change out of my outfit. I wanted her to really see how effortless it was for me to move through the world as a girl. Maybe if she saw that, she'd ease up on whatever rules were bound to come. So, when she casually mentioned she needed to run to the grocery store and told me to come along, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my purse, slipped into my flats, and we left. I drove, pushed the cart while she picked out what we needed, and blended into the routine of a mother and daughter shopping. By the time we got home, it was clear she knew I could pass. I could exist in public, unnoticed. I understood how men looked at women. As trophies, conquests, something to be won. And that thought terrified me. Every time I stepped out as Maggie, I carried that fear, careful never to invite the wrong kind of attention. I avoided conflict, kept to myself, made sure no one had the chance to question me. I'm 5'8", 140 pounds slim, but not small. I could look like a girl, move like a girl, but at the end of the day, I was a careful illusion. A mix of foam padding, birdseed, makeup, and unwavering determination. Maggie was the name I chose. Keith was the name I had, and I had ID for both. Even a school ID I had designed on my computer, just in case. I stayed dressed for the rest of the day, and when morning came, Mom told me to get ready. So I did. Tight jeans, a sleeveless blouse, gym shoes, casual but intentional. I kept my makeup light, just a touch of lipstick, and went to the kitchen for breakfast. She didn't say a word when she saw me, just left the house and came back a little while later with a headband. She slid it onto my head, adjusting my hair with careful fingers. "This'll keep it out of your face," she murmured. That was 5 months ago, right before summer break. Since then, we had been everywhere together. Shopping, errands, day trips. She never put me in a situation where I'd be exposed. She never forced me. And eventually, she even started buying me things. Earrings, clothes, small things that solidified what we both already knew. Our relationship didn't change much, except sometimes she'd slip up, call me Maggie when I wasn't dressed as her. Never in public, but still, it sent a ripple of panic through me every time. Then summer ended, and school started again. Back to being Keith every day. It was harder than I thought it would be, undoing months of moving through the world as a girl. I nearly messed up a few times. My walk never quite reverted, never lost the quiet elegance I had perfected. No one called me out on it, but I knew some people noticed. And then the party invitation came. It was from Nancy, a friend of mine. A costume party, though not for Halloween. Some ridiculous parent had complained about Halloween being a satanic ritual, and the school actually gave in. So now, all parties had to be neutral, held off campus, on non-Halloween weekends. My first instinct, go as Maggie. But I hesitated. I didn't want to fuel whatever quiet suspicions people might have had. So I started looking for another costume. Something safe, something easy. But every option I gravitated toward was a girl's costume. And that made me second-guess everything. I nearly decided not to go at all. But then Mom walked in, saw me sitting there, frustration written all over my face, and scoffed. "This is ridiculous," she said, arms crossed. "You told me yourself that some of the kids probably already suspect something. And after watching you try to act like a boy again, I can see why. What's the worst thing that happens if you go as Maggie? Someone figures it out. You know, I've never pushed you to do anything, but honestly, I think this is the perfect chance for people to see how beautiful you are and maybe even understand a little more about who you are." I stared at her. "And if it goes badly?" I challenged. "You haven't lost anything," she shrugged. "But if it goes well?" I narrowed my eyes. "Then what? I go to school as a girl?" "Yeah, not happening." She laughed. "I'm not saying anything that dramatic. But maybe, just maybe, if they see you, if they hear you, if they watch how you move, they'll realize something important." I folded my arms. "And that is?" "That you're still you," she said simply. "Just in a dress." I swallowed, staring at her. "So," she prompted, arching a brow, "are you going as Maggie?" Mom leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "I'm just saying, if it were me, I'd go as Maggie, and I'd go all out. Low-cut dress, short hemline, killer makeup, the works." I hesitated, then tested the waters. "Can I use some of my savings then?" She narrowed her eyes. "For what? You already have everything you need." "Well, not exactly. If I'm really going to make an entrance, I need about $400. In the end, she agreed, so I booked the appointment. After school on Friday, I went in for my fitting. I knew exactly what I wanted. It was just a matter of the right size and color. The lady at the shop took her time, carefully selecting the perfect match. An hour later, she applied the adhesive, and just like that, my transformation took another step forward. When I got home, I dashed up to my room, eager to take another look at my new babies. Pert, firm, a full A cup, they were perfect. I wasted no time slipping into a skirt and a low-cut top, brushing out my hair, swiping on some makeup, and stepping into my flats. The second Mom walked through the door, I was there to greet her. One glance was all it took. She set her purse down, her eyes locked onto me, more specifically, onto my chest. I hadn't bothered with a bra, and in the right light, the outline was obvious. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "looks like you got your money's worth. Can I see?" I lifted my shirt without hesitation, and she nodded, expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she picked up the phone. When she hung up, she turned to me. "You have an appointment at my salon, hair and nails. If you're serious about going all out, you should go the rest of the way." I swallowed. I had never been to a salon before. The closest I had come to doing my nails was filing them to look more feminine and applying my own polish. My hesitation must have been obvious because Mom gestured for me to sit. "I assume those come off easily enough," she said, nodding at my chest. "But the fact that you went out and bought the best breast forms available tells me this isn't just dress up for you anymore. Up until now, it was just clothes, some makeup. I let you play around with it, thinking you'd grow out of it. But now, seeing you like this, I was wrong." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I know I told you to go all out, but have you thought about what's going to happen when you walk into that party like this? This isn't something you can play down anymore. Whatever's driving you won't let you do this halfway. And with those," she gestured at my chest, "there won't be any doubt left, will there?" I instinctively brought my hands to my breasts, then let them fall into my lap. "Maggie," she continued, her voice softer now, "when I told you to do this right, I didn't think you'd take it this far. And that's why I'm telling you your friends are going to know the moment they see you. So you might as well really go all out. Hair, nails, everything." "I can play it down," I argued. "I swear." She gave me a sad smile. "No, sweetheart. I think it's time to stop fooling yourself. If you're going to do this, then do it. Knock their socks off. Show them without saying a word who you are. Are you sure they don't already suspect something? Because if they do, then this will only confirm it. And if they don't, well, does it really matter?" I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. 2 of the girls at school had seen me when I was out once. They had looked at me, really looked at me, but they never put the pieces together. At least I didn't think they had. But now, with Mum's words echoing in my head, I wasn't so sure. I looked up at her. She smiled gently and asked again about the salon. This time I nodded. She wasn't pushing me into exposing myself, she was just making me face the reality I had been avoiding. She wasn't thrilled that I wanted to become a girl, but she also knew it was inevitable. We had just taken different paths to arrive at the same truth. That night, after dinner, I pulled out the one dress I owned that would accomplish everything we had just talked about. I had bought it months ago, but until now, I never had the confidence or the body to wear it. Now that had changed. The dress was everything. Black, sleek, a mini that clung just right, sleeveless with a low neckline that hinted at more than it showed. The hem teased the air a couple of inches above my knees, and when I put it on, it was like stepping into the vision I had always held of myself. The moment I walked into that party, there'd be no more questions, no doubts. Everyone would know exactly who I wanted to be. Mom and I went to the salon together, and for the first time in my life, I had my hair professionally done. She had them cut it a bit shorter, added curls, and shaped the top into soft, delicate bangs. I barely recognized myself, but in the best possible way. Then another stylist took my hands, applied plastic nails, carefully filing and painting until I had a full, beautifully manicured set. She showed me how to pop them off if I needed to, but at that moment I didn't want to. When we left, I felt incredible, practically floating out of the salon with a smile that wouldn't fade. Once home, I went straight to my room, shutting the door behind me. I needed to be alone with this feeling, with this moment. I ran a bath, filling the tub with bubbles, and soaked in the warmth, letting the excitement settle into my bones. By the time I stepped out an hour later, my skin was soft, smooth, and glowing. A little lotion added the final silky touch before I wrapped myself in my robe and padded to the kitchen for a quick bite. Mom was out, so I made a couple of sandwiches and then returned to my room to get ready. I had already slipped into my black maillot panties, but now I pulled out my prized possession, a black satin and lace corselet. I carefully removed the garters, then used my padding to add more shape to my hips before fastening the corselet around me. The hooks alone pulled my waist in slightly, but when I tightened the laces, my body transformed. My waist shrank even more, my chest lifted, my cleavage suddenly undeniable. I settled my breasts into place, adjusting until they looked natural, then sat on my bed to pull on a pair of sheer pantyhose. Using a plastic sheet to protect my clothes, I went into the bathroom to do my makeup. This had to be my best work. Foundation, powder, a smoky blend of eyeshadow, sharp eyeliner, a touch of blush, and mascara to lengthen my lashes. Each step erased more of Keith, revealing Maggie in full. Finally, I left the lipstick for last. Only when I was satisfied did I slip the dress over my head, letting it fall into place like it had been made for me. I zipped it up and turned to the mirror. And there she was. Every dream, every stolen moment spent perfecting this craft had led to this reflection. Long, sleek legs, hips that curved just enough, a cinched waist beneath a teasing bust line, cleavage peeking out in a way that shouldn't have been possible, a delicate, doll-like face framed by flawless hair. I was her, she was me. I stepped into my black heels, grabbed a brush not to fix anything, but just to assure myself that the girl's staring back was real. A swipe of lipstick, and I was searching through my modest jewelry collection when Mom walked in. She froze. Then slowly, a smirk played at her lips. "Nobody's going to recognize you, that's for sure." I laughed. "Thanks, Mom, I think." She disappeared for a moment, then returned with a choker-style pearl necklace and matching earrings. "These will be perfect," she said, fastening the necklace as I put on the earrings. A final touch of perfume, and I reached for my lipstick again, a soft, rich plum. As I applied it, Mom watched me carefully. "Once they figure it out," she murmured, "they'll know, Maggie." How could they miss it? I swallowed. "Maybe it'll all be over by the time I get home." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Have fun, honey. And if anyone gives you a hard time, just come home, okay?" I nodded, then gathered my things into the sleek black clutch she handed me. The drive to Nancy's house was a battle against my own thoughts. Every awful scenario played through my mind, but determination kept me on course. This was happening, no turning back now. I pulled into the driveway, one of the first to arrive. The moment I opened the door and swung my legs out, I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and walked straight to the front door. My heels clicked softly against the pavement. I rang the bell. A second later, the door swung open, and there was Nancy. Her eyes went wide. "Damn, girl," she blurted, taking me in. "I mean, we figured you'd look good, but damn." I stepped inside, my mind latching onto her words. "We figured you'd look good." That meant they had already suspected something. They knew. Nancy led me toward the kitchen, casting glances at me like she was still processing what she was seeing. She slid into a chair at the table, motioning for me to sit with her. "So," she said, tilting her head, "what do I even call you tonight?" I hesitated, then answered, "Maggie." She smiled. "Nice name. Fits you." Then her eyes flicked over me again, lingering. "Seriously though, damn." I shifted uncomfortably. "Nancy, you said we figured." She nodded. "Everyone thought there was something different about you. But when Grace and I saw you at the mall with your mom, we knew. But you looked so normal." My heart stopped. They had seen me. And now all of this was just confirmation. Panic flared. "I can't do this. I need to go." I started to stand, but Nancy's hand shot out, gripping mine. "You're not leaving," she said firmly. "Nancy, the guys are going to crap their pants when they see you," she cut in, smirking. "Now sit down." I glanced down at myself, my chest, my long legs, the perfectly manicured nails that tipped my delicate fingers. This was me, every part of me meticulously crafted, every detail intentional. But still, the uncertainty lingered. Nancy, ever the voice of confidence, just rolled her eyes. "Listen, half the girls I know use falsies. Yours are just better, that's all. Relax, stop overthinking, and I promise you're going to have a great time tonight." As the other guests arrived, Nancy introduced me simply as Maggie. Most people just accepted it without a second thought, but a few those who knew me recognized me immediately. Their smiles, though, were warm, reassuring. No snide remarks, no side eyes, just acceptance, which helped me breathe a little easier. Food was served, and as I moved through the buffet line, I sensed someone behind me. Jake. He didn't say a word, just moved with me, silent but close. And when I found a seat at one of the tables, he followed. Sitting across from me, he finally spoke. "You look great, Maggie." He didn't hesitate. I wanted to say that right up front. Better than great, actually. "I never thought you'd pull it off this well, and that's a fact." I froze. "You knew?" He smirked. "Eleanor, you never quite got it all off. That, and the fact that you never had any body hair. But honestly, the biggest giveaway. Sometimes you forgot to act like a guy. The way you moved, how you used your hands, the way you sat. It wasn't much, and I don't think a lot of people noticed. But I did." He shrugged, leaning back. "Still, damn, you look good." I didn't know what to say. His words sent a storm of emotions crashing through me: fear, excitement, relief. Some of my friends had known, but none of them had ever said anything. And now here I was, sitting across from Jake, as if this had been inevitable all along. We stayed like that for a while, caught in our own little bubble as the party carried on around us. He wasn't my closest friend, but tonight, he was acting like it's sticking with me even as the music changed and couples began to dance. I watched them sway together, slow and close. Then Jake placed his hand over mine. I glanced up, startled, and he grinned before standing and giving my hand a small tug. I hesitated, but he motioned toward the dance floor, his smile unwavering. I didn't want to dance, but he was persistent, standing there waiting. And before I knew it, I let him lead me. In heels, I was nearly 5'11", but Jake was still taller. As he pulled me into the dance, his arm slid around my waist, and suddenly, I was looking up at him. He wasn't moving much, just swaying, but it made it easier to follow his lead. The song ended. Another began, and still we danced. Somehow, we had drifted to the far side of the patio, where the lighting was softer, more intimate. And that's when it happened. Jake kissed me. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. My first instinct was to glance around in a panic, but when I looked back at him, he was grinning. "I'm sorry," he said, completely unapologetic. "But what did you expect, Maggie? You're the best-looking girl here. And I'm the lucky guy." My breath caught. But, you know Yeah, he said simply. "And why would you do that?" My voice was barely above a whisper, fear curling around my words. Jake exhaled, as if I was missing something obvious. 1, because I'm your friend. 2, because you looked like you needed it. And 3, because you're my kind of girl. I stared at him. And what exactly does that mean? My voice sharpened, my pulse quickening. Was he making fun of me? Did he think I was what? He sighed, as if I was being difficult on purpose. "It means you're pretty, I like you, and we're both unattached, simple as that." Before I could respond, he pulled me close and kissed me again. This time it lasted longer. This time it left me breathless, not just from shock, but from something else entirely. I broke away gasping, just as Nancy approached. "The costume parade is starting," she announced, completely oblivious to what had just happened. "Jake, you're up before Maggie." As the lineup formed, Batman and Robin went first, then a cowboy and co-girl, a robot, a French maid, a harem girl. One by one, the costumes were shown off. Then it was my turn. Nancy took center stage, her voice bright and clear. "Everyone, this is Maggie." I stepped forward, and immediately I could see the flicker of realization in some faces. "She's a model tonight," Nancy continued. Then a voice from the crowd. "But she's not really a girl." Nancy's expression didn't waver. "Technically true," she admitted, "but she's more girl than not. And I dare anyone to say otherwise." A murmur ran through the room. Someone started to comment, "Well, she's got a nice rack," but was abruptly cut off by a sharp elbow to the ribs. Silence. Jake reached for my hand as I stepped down, but before he could say anything, I was suddenly surrounded. The girls, all of them, whisked me away, leaving him standing there, bewildered. Inside, the questions started immediately. Michelle folded her arms. "Okay, honey, we can all see that you were a knockout. But care to tell us how you pulled that off?" She gestured to my chest. I smirked. "They're the best money can buy. And yes, I can take them off." "We figured," Julie said. "But will you? I mean, we saw how Jake looked at you." Marcy, the French maid, shook her head in disbelief. "This is too weird. She looks as good as the rest of us, and she's a guy." Nancy met my gaze. "Are you staying like this? What about school?" I shook my head firmly. "I'm not going to school like this. No way." Nancy raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. But after the way Jake was making those moon eyes at you." I swallowed hard, my heart still pounding from the kiss, from the night, from everything. What had I just gotten myself into? I shook my head, but it wasn't denial, it was disbelief at how easily Mom had pieced everything together. She wasn't even looking at me, just stirring her coffee with that quiet, knowing expression. "Jake kissed you, didn't he?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah." Mom sighed, setting her mug down. And I don't know, Mom. I mean, I do know. It was nice. But it wasn't supposed to happen." She arched a brow. Because I'm not a girl," I blurted, my voice cracking. "Because everyone knows I'm not. And yet, they all just accepted me. The girls pulled me in like I belonged. Jake, he kissed me, and he didn't even hesitate. And then he asked me why I don't just stay this way. And God, Mom," my breath hitched, "a part of me wants to." She was quiet for a long moment, just watching me. Then softly, "So what's stopping you?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "Reality, Mom. School. People talking. People whispering. What happens if they don't accept me? If I'm bullied? If I can't handle it? It's one thing to dress up and pretend for a night, but to actually be a girl, Every single day I broke off, shaking my head. I don't know if I can. Mom exhaled, reaching across the table to take my hand. Sweetheart, if you're waiting for me to tell you what to do, I can't. This is your decision. But what if I make the wrong one? She squeezed my hand. Then you adjust. Life isn't about getting everything right the first time, Maggie. It's about figuring yourself out as you go. And I think her gaze softened. You already know what you want. I sat there, my chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Did I? I thought back to the party, to the way the girls had surrounded me like I had always been one of them. The way Jake looked at me, like I was the only person in the room. The way I felt when I saw myself in the mirror, my reflection finally matching the person I had always imagined myself to be. And maybe Mom was right. Maybe I did know. I just had to decide whether or not I was ready to face it. I stared at Mom, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure the girls could hear it. She was letting me do it. It wasn't an enthusiastic yes, but it was a yes. And that meant everything. I swallowed hard. You mean, if the school is okay with it, you'll let me go as Maggie? Mom exhaled, rubbing her temples. Yes, but only if I'm sure you'll be safe. And if you do this, there's no halfway. No flipping back and forth whenever it's convenient. If you become Maggie at school, then you are Maggie everywhere. Her gaze met mine firm. Do you understand what I'm saying? I nodded slowly. The room went quiet for a beat before Grace let out a squeal and practically tackled me in a hug. Oh my God, this is happening. Ivy was still stuck on a previous revelation. Forget that for a second Jacob kissed you. When were you going to tell us that? Nancy smirked. Not just once, twice. Alice grinned. And I think we can all guess how that went, judging by the way she was looking at the floor just now. Oh, come on. I groaned, but the heat rushing to my face betrayed me. Grace wiggled her eyebrows. So, was he any good? I let out a frustrated sigh. You all are impossible. Ivy folded her arms. That's not a no. Mom cleared her throat loudly, and suddenly, I wanted to sink into the floor. Ladies, she said, giving them a look before turning back to me, her voice softer. Are you sure about this, Maggie? This isn't just a costume anymore. This is your life. I bit my lip, my stomach twisting. I don't know, I admitted. I mean, I want it, I really do. But I'm scared. Nancy squeezed my hand. Then let us be scared with you. Ivy nodded. Yeah, you're not doing this alone. You have us. Mom sighed. Fine. But first, I need to talk to the school. If I get even a hint that they won't protect you, then this is off the table. I nodded, heart racing. This was real. It was happening. And despite the fear still gnawing at my gut, a tiny spark of excitement flared to life inside me. I agreed, of course. What else could I do? It felt like the decision had already been made for me by the girls, by Jake, by fate itself. As the five of us stepped outside, I couldn't help but notice the shift in energy. Ivy, who had been bitter before, seemed to have softened. Alice remained cool, but not unkind, and both Grace and Nancy were practically beaming. I was standing on the edge of something life-changing, risking everything, my reputation, my friendships, maybe even my safety, just to be the girl I had always known I was supposed to be. But deep down, I understood that the alternative was worse. Living as Keith meant slowly suffocating, agonizing over every day that passed without embracing who I truly was. The girls told me to relax, to be myself, to wear what they wore and act like I belonged, because I did. Then, just as they were about to leave, Nancy casually dropped a bombshell. Oh, by the way, I heard Jake might be stopping by your house later. They all laughed as they climbed into the car, leaving me standing there, wide-eyed. I bolted back inside, ready to change into anything better. But Mom intercepted me before I could make it past the hallway. Oh no, none of that, she said, blocking my way. You look just fine. You need to get used to the fact that girls aren't always dressed to the nines, and you don't need to be either. I huffed, but she just smirked. If you're going to start dating boys, she teased, you'll have to learn the art of waiting for them. Welcome to womanhood. I groaned, but her words stuck with me. Dating boys? Was that what I was doing? Was Jake dating me? The longer I sat there waiting, the more nervous I became. I couldn't shake the lingering fear of what school would be like. Sure, the girls were on my side, and Jake had basically declared himself my personal bodyguard, but the jocks, the guys who only saw girls as trophies, what would they see when they looked at me? Would I be a girl to them, or just a freak? By the time Jake finally showed up an hour later, all grins and confidence, I was practically buzzing with nerves. He met my mom, charmed her immediately, of course, and then we sat together on the front porch. So, he said, leaning back casually, "Are you going to do it?" I exhaled. Nancy and the others think I might as well. That's great. We can, Jacob. I cut him off, my voice barely above a whisper. Why me? He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I clenched my hands together in my lap. Why me? How can you be so okay with this? Everyone is going to know. Think about yourself. Think about what's going to happen to you. He shrugged, unconcerned. Do I look worried? Before I could answer, he reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. Maggie, he said softly, I don't know what it is about you that makes me feel this way, but I do feel it. We've known each other for years, but until last night, I never really saw you. And now that I have, I don't want to unsee it. I bit my lip, shaking my head. But people are going to talk. He smirked. Let them. Nobody's gonna mess with me. I'm too big to pick on, and just mean enough to make sure they know it. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. Soft, gentle. I didn't even have time to react before he did it again, this time slipping his tongue past my lips. I gasped when he pulled away. Jake, does that make it any clearer, Maggie? I was still reeling. I guess, but he kissed me again before I could finish my sentence, then pulled back, grinning. Enough with the doubts, he said. You'll be fine. Now, how about we go for a ride? I blinked, dazed, and before I knew it, Mom was giving me permission, and I was climbing into his car. We drove out of the city into the open countryside, where the roads stretched endlessly ahead. Jake didn't ease my worries, but he did confuse me in a way I wasn't prepared for. We stopped for a bite to eat, then drove aimlessly for hours, neither of us in any hurry to go back. He was comfortable, relaxed, like he had no second thoughts about what he was doing. I, on the other hand, was drowning in them. When he finally dropped me off at home, his parting words were, I want to see you at school tomorrow, looking just as foxy as you do right now. I just stood there as he drove away, then slowly made my way inside. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Foxy? I didn't feel foxy, but I did look like a girl. I could hear Mom talking to someone on the phone, but I ignored it. Instead, I went straight to my room, booted up my computer, and started searching. There had to be someone else like me, someone who had actually done this before. I found a few stories, not a lot, but enough. Most of them said the terror of the first day was never as bad as they expected. Some had been threatened, but nothing ever came of it, and eventually the stares and whispers faded. Most of them had survived simply by being themselves. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Could I do that? I wanted to be a girl more than anything. That feeling had been with me for as long as I could remember. And now I was on the verge of making it happen. But standing on the edge of my dream, I felt paralyzed. I could turn back, walk away, be Keith again, pretend this had all been a phase. I almost convinced myself to do it, but then I looked in the mirror, and I saw her. Not a disguise, not a fantasy. Me. I swallowed hard. I needed someone to tell me I was making the right decision, so I went to find Mom. When Mom told me someone was coming to see me, I wasn't sure what to expect. But when the doorbell rang and I opened it to find the principal of our school standing there, my stomach dropped. I stepped aside wordlessly, leading her into the family room. Her eyes widened slightly as she took me in wider than I had ever seen before, but she quickly recovered, smoothing her expression into professional neutrality. You must be Maggie, she said, her voice even. I received quite a few calls yesterday and today, some from your friends and one from your attorney. My attorney. I barely had time to process that before she continued. Your friends assured me that there's no reason you shouldn't be allowed to attend school as a girl, and your lawyer. Well, he reminded me of the law. She adjusted her posture. Of course, I'm already familiar with the regulations, but I came today after speaking with your mother. I needed to see for myself if you were everything they claimed you were. Mom gestured for both of us to sit. Maddie has told me that she's felt this way since she was very young, and over the years, she's become so skilled at presenting as a girl that it's simply who she is now. She glanced at me with quiet pride. I've watched her grow into herself, and last night only confirmed what I already knew. The principal listened intently, then folded her hands together. My first concern is your safety. Regardless of what the law says, I have the right to make judgment calls when it comes to student well-being. If you had simply looked like a boy in a dress, I would have had my doubts. But she studied me again. You look quite nice. A strange warmth settled in my chest. She wasn't saying it as a compliment, more like an observation. And yet, hearing her acknowledge my appearance felt like a small validation. She continued, if I allow this, one way to ensure your protection is to have you start as a new student at the beginning of the next term. That way, I can issue you a fresh ID, adjust your schedule, and excuse you from classes like gym that might pose complications. She paused, giving me a measured look. However, if you do this, you'll be treated like any other girl in every respect. That includes following the dress code and school regulations at all times. Is that satisfactory? I wanted to jump up and hug her, but instead, I simply nodded, a grateful smile stretching across my face. I'll take that as a yes, she said, smiling faintly. You have 6 weeks left in this term. Until then, you'll continue attending school as a boy, behaving accordingly. But on the first day of the new term, you'll report directly to me. Understood. I nodded again, trying not to shake with excitement. The wait dragged on unbearably. I told no one what I had decided, not even Jake. When the girls asked, I simply said I needed more time to think. They seemed okay with that. Jake, however, hated it. But finally, the day came. I woke up early, attached my breast forms carefully, dressed in a navy and white plaid skirt with a crisp white blouse, and brushed my hair until it shined. As I checked my reflection, the girl in the mirror smiled back, the girl I had always known I was. Mom hugged me before I left. She didn't say much, just smoothed my hair down and kissed my forehead before sending me off. At school, I picked up my new ID and class schedule. As far as the records showed, Maggie was a new student. I walked into my first class, passing Grace in the hallway. She stopped dead, her head whipping around as she stared after me, but I didn't slow down. I walked into the classroom, took a seat, and no one even blinked. None of my friends were in that period, so the students just accepted me as the new girl. When class ended and I stepped into the hallway, I wasn't alone for long. Ivy, Alice, and Grace were waiting. Why the hell didn't we know you were starting today? Ivy demanded, hands on her hips. Yeah, Alice added. We thought we were your friends. I raised my hands in defense. Calm down. I didn't tell anyone because I'm supposed to be a new student. If word got out ahead of time, even accidentally, it could ruin everything. They considered that, then nodded. Fair, Ivy admitted. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. The day went smoothly, shockingly so. Even when I used the ladies' restroom, no one batted an eye. I started to relax, easing into my new role. Of course, there was one thing I couldn't ignore: the boys. Almost every guy in school checked me out. I was just another girl to them. And while I ignored most of it, part of me was thrilled. By the end of the day, Jake found me. So, you actually did it, he said, smirking. I did. Well then, he said, we should go out to celebrate. I hesitated. Like a date? Exactly like a date. I should have said no. I should have been cautious. But instead, I said yes. And just like that, we were a couple. It felt good, really good, to have a boyfriend. To be seen as a girl, treated as a girl. I loved the way Jake held my hand in the halls, how protective he was, how easy it was to slip into this life. But I wasn't naive. If anyone found out the truth, it wouldn't just be my life on the line. For now, though, it didn't matter. Mom and I settled into our routine. She still treated me the same, except now I was always Maggie. And as for what was under my clothes, that secret was mine to keep, for as long as I needed it to be. Jake had managed to sneak a hand onto my chest once, his palm pressing against the curve of my breast form. He looked satisfied, like he'd gotten exactly what he wanted, but I felt nothing. And that nothing frustrated me more than I could admit. It made me ache for something real. That moment, more than anything, cemented the truth I had always known. I needed more. I needed to be real. It wasn't until the following summer that Mom finally took me to see a doctor. He was kind, understanding. He had worked with others like me before. He didn't question my choices or my identity. Instead, he handed me a prescription. They weren't magic pills. I didn't wake up the next day transformed. I had to wait. The changes were slow, agonizingly slow, but they came. By my last term of high school, I no longer needed padding. My body had reshaped itself, my own A-cup breasts forming naturally, making my old breast forms completely unnecessary. And it was only after I had discarded them for good that I let Jake feel the real me. It was different that time. When his hands slipped under my blouse and touched my skin, I felt it everywhere. A tingling rush, a confirmation of everything I had worked for, everything I had become. When I got home that night, I stood in front of my mirror, my fingers lightly tracing over my chest, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I had made the right choice. Now, 3 years later, I am a woman, completely, fully, undoubtedly a woman, just as much as Nancy, Ivy, or Alice, who are still my best friends. Jake and I ended up at the same college, and to this day, he still tells me the same thing. You're my kind of girl. The only difference now, he's right. I am his kind of girl.